I would like to introduce to you Toby Redshaw. We're very fortunate to meet up with Toby. Even prior to Verizon investing in us, thanks to MR, is very fortunate to have run into him. Toby is responsible for the entire Verizon's 5G ecosystem, the innovation and the product development, AR, VR, and a variety of location and geo services. Prior to Verizon, Toby was most recently CEO of Kevington Advisors, which was focused on providing leading-edge consulting offering services in enterprise technology for startups and for various different government and military engagements. Toby also had leadership positions in a variety of companies, global CIO positions in American Express, Aviva, etc. Toby also helped found a global startup based out of Silicon Valley and China, London, and Ohio. And he started as one of the first employees in FedEx. So with that, I'd like to have Toby come. By the way, he's also the founding chairman of Kellogg Innovation Network. So pretty impressive. By the way, he's also a recent citizen. He changed his citizenship to being a U.S. citizen from being a Mexican. And
no, I didn't actually change it. I added it.
You added it.
I kept the old one just in case.
So he's going to talk in. And so his entire speech is going to be in Spanish.
Thank you very much. There are literally 50 different jokes in Mexico, where the punchline is walls. We've been digging tunnels for 20 years, so I won't give you any of those. So I'm going to start a timer for 15 minutes so we can do Q&A. Really sort of not going to talk about that. I'm going to get to that after going through just a little bit of background and then a couple of questions on your favorite subject, the fourth industrial revolution, and why that really matters. I know we hear about that a lot and probably a little too much. But I've always been a believer that many things in life would be easy if you could do them backwards, right? So if I could see what all the cards were at the end of a hand in poker, I'd win every hand, right? Or if I knew where the ball was going to land in golf, I'd be great at golf. Unfortunately, I'm not. Relationships would be much better if you could see the end. Then certain things would probably not come out of your mouth. You can ask my wife. But I also think that the fabric is the startup world backwards and makes it easier, right? Instead of some young kids showing up with some great idea and half a PowerPoint and we get excited about it and then we put some money in and we get going and then we go, ooh, and then we pivot and we go this way, no, that's not right, and then we pivot and then we do this again, and then 9 out of 10 of those you throw in the trash. You incubate the ideas sort of in that backwards way with a big enterprise partner. You go out and you get seasoned veterans sort of where you would end up with the startup if it was successful and then go from there. So we're big fans of that model and very happy to be investors, both in that and in the Hive, which is some of the Hive guys were here, but I guess they're, oh, yep, there we go. Also with the Hive. So that didn't work. Try the other way. There we go. I have it upside down in my hand. So a tiny bit of background, right? So I've got this awesome job of working with partners, big and small, and startups, and incubating real solutions with 5G and the currencies that 5G provides that I will show you. We're absolutely convinced that nothing fantastic is going to get invented in a conference room at headquarters with PowerPoint. Just doesn't happen. There are headquarters where they believe that happens. It doesn't. We think we have to get innovators and entrepreneurs and engineers and scientists and anthropologists and get dirt under the fingernails and knock around things with 5G and percolate up ideas. We're opening 5, I'll show you, we're opening up 5 labs around the country where we will do that, where we will, imagine everybody's been to a WeWork, right? So there are a couple of good things about a WeWork, maybe 3. Imagine the 3 good things, and then imagine the good things about an incubator, marry those 2. That's what we have in these in our 5G locations. I'll talk about that a little more. So this is basically what 5G does. The spec itself is cloud-native software-defined. So all of the things that you can do with cloud-native software-defined infrastructures, like virtualization, like service approaches, that's a new thing for networks, right? Networks were really complicated boxes and wires. So your ability to change, your ability to optimize, your ability to get data exhaust, your ability to slice services. 5G will let you, between any 2 points, have 8 different services running at the same time, 8 different virtual slices through the network. But it'll do all of this stuff. What a lot of people don't know is this one. Right now, CAT-M or LTE will let you do about 1,000 devices per square kilometer over a cellular network. This is designed for 1 million with really, really clever battery management, which should extend batteries to 10 years. And of course, you've all heard about the extremely low latency, the massive bandwidth. So we think those things, when we bring in startups and we bring in people to ideate and partners, and sometimes we partner with other labs, we believe that that will percolate lots and lots of ideas and change massive industries. The CEO of Qualcomm put out a very detailed paper that said it's going to create $12.5 trillion worth of disruption, broken down by verticals. Let's say he's off by 5 trillion. It's still 7.5 trillion. See how quickly I did that math in my head? That's why I have this big job. Verizon's a lot more than a network company, right? We have gigantic Oath, which includes, film companies, Tumblr, Riot Films, all the AOL properties, TechCrunch, all of the Yahoo properties, and some of the best AI on the planet. We've got a 1.4 exabyte, probably best tech stack I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've spent a bunch of time inside Lawrence Livermore National Labs, where they do have some pretty good tech, and I think this stuff is engineered better, optimized for performance. 1.4 exabyte Hadoop stack, developed and run by the guys that invented Hadoop that still work for us, so they're kind of good at it. And if you think about a giant network and how much of the internet and how much of video goes through our system, and you think about us being the #1 also in telematics in the States, then all of the properties we have, and 110 million people using phones, and 1.2 billion phones with a little app on it that tells us what the app behavior is. That's a crazy amount of data. If only we had world-class AI and a 1.4 exabyte stack to process that. Oh, we've got that. Also, 5G is a marathon. It is not a sprint, and it's a marathon that started like 3 years ago. If you didn't invest heavily in spectrum and you didn't invest heavily in fiber, you've got a very long problem to go before you can actually deliver this. So we are pretty happy with where we are in both of those perspectives. So this is a little chart that shows where we have the initial commercial locations, which we launched this week. So we're first live to the market. It also shows where our fixed broadband and mobility testing is underway. And then my 5G labs, again, it's the best parts of a incubator, best parts of a WeWork with extensions out into local community. One on the corner of 6th Avenue and 24th in New York, that's Chelsea. One right here that will open in a month, right on the corner of Hamilton and Cowper, which we will connect very closely to Stanford and also to Ericsson's innovation lab here. But that will be a facility where you can come in and bring whomever you want and work and get your fingers dirty, dirt under your fingernails on 5G. Another one in the film district in LA. Another one on L right near DuPont Circle in DC, especially for government and nonprofit locations. And we'll have a mini one, I think, up in Sacramento, working on smart cities stuff there. So that's a pretty good focused area. We've built in a really clever knowledge management platform into this too to sort of accelerate the learning and distribute the new knowledge. Coming into telecom as a new guy, never having worked, I worked at Motorola for 6 years, but it's not really the same. It was amazing to me when we built our own spec and got the first equipment in 2017 and went out into the field, and I'm sitting in the room with the president of Bell Labs and his equivalent from Samsung and his equivalent from Ericsson, and we're looking at the early data, and they're going, wow, didn't know it would do that. Well, look at that. That's much longer than we thought, much better. I'm going, wait, how can you guys be surprised by this? You're the president of Bell Labs, and you're his cousins from the other locations. And that's when I realized, and they said this is not just an incremental step, it is a huge step forward. If you remember going back to those items, we're talking in some cases hundreds of times improved over 4G, and of course the latency things you can't do. So I'm not going to go through all of the slides. Hopefully you can get these and they can be shared. That one just talks about how we're structuring those labs and what we do. A little bit more on that. There's a cool video that we made ourselves for nothing because we've got some good, cool video people.
My name is Steve Feiner. I'm a professor of computer science at Columbia University, and much of my research, my lab's research, is on user interfaces in general, and in particular on augmented reality and virtual reality. We're extremely interested in how those technologies can help people work together, whether they're located in the same place or whether they're at different places. So one thing that we're really excited about is, as the work that we're doing is maturing, to work on rehabilitation, to be able to see if we can have patients with people who otherwise would have to be physically in the same place that they are. So we're very interested in how very, very fast networking can make it possible for people to be able to communicate together better and to be able to perform tasks together in which they need to be very aware of what the other person is doing. What is important to us about 5G is that it provides extremely low latency in comparison with previous networking technologies. A very short amount of time between one person doing something and the other person experiencing what they're doing, as well also between a person doing something and they themselves seeing what it is that they're doing. It's important for people to connect because we're social animals. We interact with each other on a daily basis when we're in the same place. And the dream that we as technologists have is that of people being able to interact with each other as naturally as possible when they're not in the same place.
So let me just say something about that. That professor from computer science at Columbia built that thing in our lab with Columbia Medical. It's actually a therapeutic setup for people who've had stroke damage or brain injuries coming back from the war. And let me describe it think of it as an analog for many other things. Because this thing is in virtual reality compared to doing that in the physical world to regrow and reconnect your motor skills, repattern your brain for that, it's more engaging and more immersive, so it's about 20% better. Because it's in that environment, a therapist can do it with 2 people, and they don't have to be in the same location, and the therapist can do it with 6 pairs all at the same time and monitor them, as in teaching, as in medicine, a good therapist makes a difference. So that's about 3x better on top of that. Because it's in in a virtual environment, you can gamify it. When you put patients into that thing to start with, they start on Jupiter's gravity, and then they go to the moon's gravity, then they want to go to the Earth's gravity. And it's really engaging. We put David Faber and my chairman in there, and we couldn't get him out. We were just like, no, you got to stop playing the game. No, I'm trying to get to Earth's gravity. So that's about 3x. That's about 3x better on top of that. Because it's virtual, when the bowl falls off that platter that you're trying to keep the bowl on, the simple exercise to get your motor skills back, it resets automatically. So that's like another 20% gain on top of that, as opposed to having people with motor skills damage chase a ball around the room and then get it back on the tray and start going again with the therapist. It has data exhaust, so you can look at the progression of how patients are doing. So Toby is doing better in these 3 areas. He needs more work in this, and you can actually measure it rather than the very subjective. I think I saw this as a therapist. And then across the entire population, it has data exhaust. So it tells the Columbia people, you think these 3 procedures really make a difference? There's no difference from these. You should concentrate on these 7. So add all of those up. And just because I put this in virtual reality, I've now got somewhere between a 6 and 8x improvement. It's criminal that this is treated any other way than in virtual reality, and hopefully that will roll out a lot. And so that's an analog for what you can do with 5G. So we're super excited about it. So look, let's jump onto IoT. This is really how IoT works, right? It's things, connected devices. Things connect. You need a network for that. Once they're connected, you collect data. Then you learn something from the data, and then you do something with it. That's all IoT. That's all IoT really is. I stole that from Timothy Chu down at Stanford, who's certified smart computer science professor. What company was he with? What's the super tolerant? He was president of Oracle Cloud for a while, but the super fault tolerant, expensive thing back in the 80s. And was it Tandem? I think it was Tandem. Maybe Tandem. Yeah. Anyway, he's one of those where you'd pay the engineers whatever they wanted because there weren't very many of them. So certified smart guy. That's his model. And then the 5G impact across these. So this is one of the reasons why we believe 5G is going to help the hockey stick of IoT. But we think it's a bigger story, right? So, show of hands, who's heard of the 4th Industrial Revolution? Like everybody, right? It's out here, it's, in New Jersey, we talk about the Jets and the Giants, and then out here, you guys talk about this, or we watch Soprano reruns. A little more high tech out here. Show of hands, who knows what the 5 technologies are that are the underpinning of the 4th Industrial Revolution? If you dig into Klaus's writings on this, well, who knew before you saw this slide? Like almost nobody. I've had this conversation. They're like, is it? I don't know. And so, but the whole theory, the way they got to the 4th Industrial Revolution was to say, look, starting in about 2018, in the next 4 or 5 years, there's going to be a hockey stick curve. Forget the graph that goes at 2018 back to 2010 that looks like a really steep climb for these technologies. In utilization or average throughput unit costs or availability or penetration or viability or critical awareness or what's going on in the venture community, all of these are going to go through a hockey stick curve in the next 3-4 years. They're also going to feed off each other. There's going to be a flywheel effect, right? Think what you can do in AR, VR if you had really fantastic next-gen super fast AI, especially with things like computer vision. Now, if I could link that to IoT and AR and AI, what could I do with that if all of those hockey sticks? So it's this huge disruptive flywheel. That's where Mollenkopf, the CEO Qualcomm comes up with his $12.5 trillion, it's going to be massively disruptive. And things that architect into this future are going to be way, way more effective than things that don't. And history shows very clearly that when you build things with a more effective, more modern, leading edge tech architecture, the industries and the companies that didn't fall apart. I mean, anybody bought anything from British Steel lately? No, right? In the 20s, they and it created an empire that had some lasting effects. Anybody in here from India? Yeah. So, and some of those effects were good, some not so good. Cricket to start with. After that, not sure what, but that was funded on the back of British Steel, right? In 23, the Frash process was invented, and British Steel said, "Oh no, we're not doing that. We're British Steel." Carnegie did the new one, the Ruhr Valley did the new one, and what happened to British Steel? Disappeared. So if I'm architected for this, the things I can do, and it'll be things that'll be surprising, right? I'll get in trouble for saying this, but how much thought went into these 5 things when they architected Facebook? Like zero, right? So I think you're going to see this wave of disruption and creation, that creative destruction cycle on the back of this. Now, if only I worked at a company that had an AR, VR business, reports to me, had fantastic AI, talked about that, had millions of customers already on IoT and had a multi-10, 15, $20 billion enterprise business backing that up, and had a network that had the capability to have thousands of edge computing sites on it. Because if you remember, if you're virtualizing the telco network, the radios at the edge become virtualized computing mini data centers.
Shouldn't we add robotics to that?
Who said that? You said that?
Which going to be the 5th?
Yeah, and robotics will get leverage from this, but I just don't think you're going to see a hockey stick curve in robotics in the next 4 to 5 years. I think that's 5 to 10 years out. I think you're going to see some really big improvements. But like AI, in the next year, there will be platforms delivered within 12 to 15 months. There will be platforms delivered that per unit cost, apples to apples, are 100x better than the best things available today. 100x better, right? Robotics will get better, but robotics will be a consequence, right? If you talk to people that build factory robots, if you could put real-time SLAM on them and give them vision and give them wheels and 5 millisecond response time, you could reconfigure factories on the fly and do some very cool stuff. So yes, coming there, as big as this, and will it be one of the things, like autonomous vehicles and autonomous mobility will really hockey stick. But it'll be because of these things. So I've got this. We kick ass at this, right? Try and find a 1.4 exabyte monster or somebody that spits off 1 billion bits a minute as a set of signals, which is what our network does. We're in this not as deep as we should. NextGen Cloud and Edge, we will be one of the few edge providers, and we're miles ahead of everybody else on 5G, getting that dirt under our fingernails. Now, if only I had labs where I could connect with startups and build that and do work backwards, which is the easy approach, like with Hive and Fabric. Oh, wait, I'm doing that too. So I've got the funnest job, and I think this is going to be, when we look back in about 3 years, we're going to see huge new companies, and we're going to see a bunch of dead companies, and we're going to see new experiences, and new processes and new supply chains. I mean, the food supply chain, the healthcare supply chain, the entire transportation portion of that, and then the education. We've launched an EdTech challenge. We think the entire supply chain for education is broken. We think these things can really help. I got one last tiny story to give you an education one. I did 20 minutes of training 14 months ago to be a person to work the deli counter at Walmart. because it's always good to have a backup career. So they put me into a little company, it's like 4 blocks from here, Striver. They put me into a 360-degree environment, said, look, there are 5 things that are 98% of the problems at deli counters. Tell me what they are. And I go, okay, well, that spinning thing with a blade on it is sitting there all by itself going 1,000 miles an hour. That's bad. The fridge is open. I'm pretty sure that meat shouldn't be on the floor. Don't know what the other 2 are. They pull me out, and they go, look, there was a customer standing right in front of you, and you ignored him. And then there was one other thing that was broken. So a couple of minutes go by, they put me back in, and now I'm in a different one, and I look around and I go, customer, spinning, cutting thing, fridge, got it, right? That stuff's not stacked, nailed it, right? I had the pattern matching from the visual item. That's 14 months ago. I can close my eyes and still do that. In fact, it's a horrible curse because every time I go to a deli counter, I go, what are the 5 things? And then I tell them, I go, hey, your meat thing is, and they normally tell me to go intercourse myself. But rhymes with duck. So because it went from observing, trying to learn, to experiencing. The way Walmart used to do that, get a bunch of employees that hated pretending they were fake customers in a mocked-up store, truck them, fly them all in, overnight them, have them stand and watch these bad actors pretend this scenario, and then go, what did you learn? They go, I'm so bored, I learned nothing, right? Think about all the situations that are even more complicated than deli counters that you could do that world with. Think about attaching that to intelligent vision. Think about attaching that to AR and AR instrumenting all of that stuff. Think about attaching it to clever pattern matching algorithms that are running so fast they seem instantaneous because they're right there next to you on next-gen AI stacks on the edge. Lots and lots of cool things. I mean, you could change, look at a city, right? It's just a massive, super inefficient processes. New York has over 60 agencies that have vehicles. A lot of the vehicles are exactly the same. You know how much sharing of that asset they do across those 60 organizations? 0, right? 0. So that's my whole thing. Hopefully you can get that. I'll be around for a little bit. Got to disappear to LA in a couple of hours. And go see a big gaming company because this will also change, radically change gaming. So thank you, everybody. Cheers.